What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? This is Off Ball Takes coming at you with a live episode, live recap of the NBA Finals. The finals are officially over. But before we get started with this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. For those of you who are new here, if you're returning, I appreciate you. We appreciate you, being here. You guys make the chat. But man, oh man, the finals are officially over. And what a run it was for both these squads. Both of them had championship mentalities for sure, and they definitely showed it in this game 100%. But we'd have to give a huge round of applause to our NBA champions for this year, the Denver Nuggets. So they have completely finished the series. They won it 4-1, and they sealed this game in a 94-89 point victory. So, overall, I thought this was probably the most entertaining game out of all of them, out of all of the, not like in the entire playoffs, but
For the last 5 minutes.
yeah. I mean, in general, though, I thought it was a pretty entertaining game just because I feel like we saw a side of Miami and a desperation that we hadn't seen in a while. And, they, through the first three quarters, I thought they played very tenaciously, very strong. They had that fight in them. And then, Denver, they have their backs against the wall and they're like, well, we got to, finish this at home. We don't want to extend this series any further than it needs to go. So, for me, that's how I looked at the game. I thought it was entertaining from that point of view, that it was a fight, that it wasn't a blowout or anything like that. But man, oh man, I mean, it was off to a rough start. And I guess, we do have to talk about the victors first. That being Denver. Hang on. Sorry, 1 second. I'm checking something.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that being Denver. But wow, holy crap. The first few minutes had me kind of scared, I'm not going to lie, in terms of how this game was going to go. Because, Miami came out pretty strong, I thought, on the attack. The plan was to, probably get Jokic in foul trouble. And they did that. He had to sit out for a little bit. But, the turnovers for Denver originally, I was like, okay, this doesn't look good. And then they were shooting, a historically low percentage. I think, even through, I think the first half, Michael Porter Jr. was their, lead scorer. So that kind of tells you how this game was going for them in the first half. But, they had a great second half, I thought. But, overall, we do have to I want to look at team stats, first of all. They shot 45% from the field, 17% from the three-point line, shot 5 for 28, which I think is pretty bad. And they definitely got lucky that, Miami was also shooting pretty poorly as well from the field and the three. Missed a lot of free throws this game, That was surprising to me, especially at home. Took me by surprise, and a lot of them were kind of necessary free throws in my opinion, but nonetheless, they got it done without them. They had 57 rebounds, which is pretty good. You kind of expect that when your team is bigger. 21 assists.
This is a lot.
Exactly, yeah, 21 assists. So that's pretty good as well. But the turnovers, man, it was just an ugly game for Denver, but they did power through and push through and get this W. And then, I guess to look at their stats in general, Jokic led the way, 28 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists. And, when Jokic has that number of 4 assists, you kind of just look around and you're like, okay, nobody else did anything. That's kind of the narrative that you kind of have to look at with that. When Jokic doesn't have a double-digit assist game, that kind of means that he was getting the ball to the guys, but they weren't necessarily, hitting it when he was giving it to them, Then Jamal Murray had 14 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. I thought he had a mediocre game, if you want me to be frankly honest. Didn't handle the ball very well. A lot of low IQ shots, and that was my main problem with, Jamal Murray. I'm not trying to attack him because, obviously he played a huge factor in terms of getting them here and getting this championship. But good Lord, I mean, the guy, I don't know. Yeah. That's been my number one gripe with him is definitely shot selection, and the timing of his turnovers could be very grave at times. But nonetheless, his 14 points, they wouldn't have won this game without his 14 points. KCP, I thought he had a better performance than previously, and I guess the stats don't really speak for that. But, in certain moments, he was definitely on fire. Exactly. He was really good defensively. He had some hustle plays, and I feel like that's the one word that you can use to describe this game is hustle. Both teams were diving on the floor. The refs were kind of just letting them play at some points in the game, but Reffing was an issue for me in this game. I think there were a couple calls, maybe more than a couple, that I thought, were kind of BS, but we'll talk about that once we kind of move past, both of these teams and then talk about the game in general. And then, Michael Porter Jr., 16 points, 13 rebounds, definitely a bounce back game. Not the greatest still, but once again, better than what he had been putting up before. And he definitely showed some hustle on the boards as well with 13 rebounds. Aaron Gordon kind of slowed down, 4 points, 7 rebounds. I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, he did have a great game last game, but when other guys are kind of putting up double digit numbers, then I mean, you can kind of get away with that. I feel like, if Michael Porter Jr. plays better, then you kind of don't need Aaron Gordon, if that makes sense. I feel like that's the kind of give and take that you have with that situation.
Right.
Bruce Brown Jr., holy crap. Another unsung hero kind of game. He had some really good defensive plays for sure. I think he hit the game sealing free throws as well, if I'm not mistaken. And he hit a clutch bucket, I think, off of a putback, something like that. I can't remember. Okay, yeah, so that's the deal with his stats. I thought he had a solid game as well. Christian Brown, 7 points. He hit some big free throws for sure. He's a rookie, so, you can only expect but so much from him. But he did have, 24 minutes played, which is huge for him. Jeff Green with 4 points. But, wow, all I can say is wow. Because if you look at the stats, you would think Denver lost this game. You know what I mean? Overall, just ugly, man. Like, I get it, it's exciting, but it's still hideous. I mean, this was nasty gameplay, but, what were your thoughts on this game as a whole? Or you can start with Denver, whatever you want.
Yeah, we'll start with Denver, I
Sure.
guess. And then, we'll move on into Miami. But
Sure.
yeah, obviously, like you said, this was a really important game, obviously, for, Denver, because of course, it's the closeout game. You're one win away from an NBA title. You're first for the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Its entire existence. And it was funny because, like you said, when the game started off, it felt like a lot of guys were from the jump, like kind of nervous, kind of tight.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, a lot of, mistakes, a lot of turnovers, a lot of just, bizarre possessions. And it got a little better, but even then, like there were still long stretches where it was just, like you said, really ugly. Like you mentioned, obviously you got to start with Jokic, right? A great game, 28 and 16. Had early foul trouble. I think he had it was either 2 or 3 in the first half.
Yeah. I think it was 2.
Yeah, and he had to sit for a pretty significant stretch, and they didn't get killed in those minutes, right? But they still lost those minutes. And like you said, it felt like, okay, this is starting to get kind of weird. But Miami was never really, up by a ton when they had that lead. So I felt like going into halftime, Miami probably needed a bigger lead for me to feel like they were going to win. And I think at halftime I think the score was I think it was like 51-44, right? So
yeah,
it's only a 7-point game at halftime. Like you said, Jamal Murray definitely cooled down the last couple of games. I do think Miami's defense impacted that. I mean, they were pressing him, a lot of ball pressure, zone defense. Michael Porter Jr., like you mentioned, had a bounce back game for, stretches, right? Because he was attacking the basket more. The jump shot was awful, but everybody's jump shot for Denver was pretty much awful.
Yeah.
Like you said, 5 for 28 from 3.
Yeah, at one point they were like 1 for 17. It was so ugly.
Yeah, that's 18%, and we're rounding up, so that's not exactly great. But, he attacked the basket, he attacked the glass, but still late in the game, he just wasn't going to be getting minutes because then, he kind of reverted back to taking some, poor shots.
Sure.
And they went with Bruce Brown to close it out, and he wasn't playing that well either for a while. And then he, like you said, in the fourth, he, gave you a much better effort with the offensive rebounds and the free throws. But, yeah, that was kind of a rough, stretch for a while because, again, with Denver, you had multiple guys in foul trouble. I think Murray had 2 fouls early. I think Jokic had 3 or 2 early, and then Gordon had 3 early. So they had a long stretch where Gordon and Jokic both had to sit. Right, Jeff Green was out there at center guarding Bam, and he's not a center, so he couldn't really do anything. And then they put in DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, that was funny. And then he got a block,
which was really funny. Especially as a Laker fan, and he got a block, right?
Yeah.
But, like you don't expect much from him.
Right.
He's not really a part of the rotation, but
No.
regardless, like you said, a lot of it was about hustle. A lot of big plays, like you mentioned, Caldwell Pope. The numbers don't necessarily reflect it, but he had a lot of big plays on Butler as well, right?
Yeah.
I think he had a couple of fast break possessions where he shut out, Butler and prevented him from scoring.
He got the steal too.
He had that. Yeah, exactly. He had that one play late in the fourth where Butler, had nowhere to go and was kind of getting ready to pass it, and then stole it and ran off with it. Hit a big three in the fourth.
Yeah.
So obviously didn't shoot that well, right? But again, he played well enough on defense, and gave you enough offense to make up for it, right? Because like
Right.
you said, Aaron Gordon wasn't that great this game, but he also battled foul trouble. But like you
Right.
said, if other guys, if Michael Porter Jr., he played better, right? Because he had some really horrible games, in these finals, and this was probably his best performance.
Yeah.
Well,
In
not
this
probably, it
series.
was his best
Yeah, in this
performance.
series it was
Uh,
his best one.
exactly. So that coupled with coupled with a few other guys, decent performances kind of makes up for it. But obviously the main key was Jokic here, right? Because again, in the
Right.
second half, right, he didn't foul at all. Did a much better job, wasn't making, mistakes. He had a couple of bad passes, I thought, but overall he played, a really clean second half and was pretty much involved in just about every play to get him that win. And that's
Sure.
what you needed to do, right? You need your superstars, in this type of game to kind of pull you out, right? Your best players. Um, and that's kind of the key for them. Just like when you look at Miami, right? Bam, he started really strong. I think he had 16 or so, or 14 or 16 or so at halftime, right? But then in the second half, you know, ended up with 20. So you only had about, 6 or so points in the second half.
Right.
Battled on the boards. But again, like you're probably not going to get a ton of super high scoring games from him because that's just, even though he's averaged 20 a game in the regular season, he's just not known as a scorer, right? Like a
Right.
high level offensive game from him is probably like 25, right? Much more than that is like a really, really good offensive game for him, right? And then you look at Butler, who's, in my opinion, really awful for most of the game. He had that one stretch late in the fourth, right, to get them right back into the game. But, it's just like, wow, where was this for most of the game? But despite that, Miami was up for a while, but, he just wasn't good enough, I thought, in this game. And I don't know, again, if he was hurt or if he was fatigued or, or whatever, but he just didn't play that well. And that was kind of one of the differences in this series is just, the difference between, Denver's best player and Miami's best player. And that's not a knock on Jimmy Butler. But he's definitely in, the very next tier, right? When you look at those, that list of superstars,
Mm-hmm.
right? In that next tier, right? He's not
Right.
in that uber top tier, right? But he's very close. Because again, you get to 2 NBA finals as the best player, you still, are one of those, you know, guys,
Yeah.
right? But he's not quite in that other tier. But again, in fairness, maybe he's had that ankle bothering him. And then you look at the other guys, right? Bruce was okay, not great, right? But okay enough. 12 points, 8 rebounds. Didn't really get much from Robinson. Caleb Martin was okay. Lowry was pretty solid for most of the game. Even on the boards, he had 9 rebounds. So you had enough from your role players, right? But the stars, particularly Jimmy, right? Because he's their best player,
Yeah.
and he's the guy that more so looked at as a superstar if you view him that way more than Bam. Just wasn't good enough.
Right.
Which is rough if you're Miami, because again, they didn't even play that well, but Denver was so awful that you're just like, man, if Miami was just, if you got an even average Butler game for, the first 3 quarters, right, you
You
might
could have
have been
won.
able to steal this one.
Yeah.
Uh, but it just didn't work out that way. But, either way, we both kind of went into this game thinking Denver was going to win. Um, I was almost leaning towards it may not be that close of a game, but it really was. It was the closest game pretty much these entire finals because I don't think either team was ever up by, that much. I think Miami was up by, I think, 10 at one point,
Yeah. They
right? But
were yeah, they were up by 10.
yeah, but I mean, no one was ever up by any more than that. It was pretty close for the entire game. And it felt like Denver was going to run away with it, towards the end, right? But then,
Mhm.
like I said, Butler made that big run. But that's just kind of the thing here, right? It's just, and that's kind of the rough thing, with Miami is again, you had a great, Cinderella-esque season, right? Just to get to the finals against a number one seed, a team that's better than you. And you just had to have more things go your way in order to pull it off when you're not as talented.
Right.
Because again, some of the role guys, yeah, they were bad, right? I think Strus had a couple of 0 point performances. Vincent had some really bad performances at times, right? But also your stars just, particularly Jimmy, right? Your best player, I don't think was necessarily good enough if you were planning on beating, the Nuggets. But I just didn't feel like that was in the cards because Denver, I just think, is the better team. They're bigger, they have more size, they're more
Mhm.
athletic,
Mhm.
they're more skilled, and they just have more ways, I think, that they can hurt you.
Oh yeah.
Um, but again, you still have to give Miami credit, like you said, for battling, right? And making it a game, right? Because when you're down 3-1, it's easy to kind of just like throw in the towel and just say, like, we're not going to win. So we might as well, just kind of like just show up and just kind of exist for 4 quarters. But, they did give them all they could handle. It's just Jimmy wasn't good enough. for most of the game, and that was kind of the difference there. Because again, it wasn't like for Denver you had a ton of guys play that great, but their best player, obviously played well enough and made a lot of key plays late, to get them that win. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of the story for this game and this series. It's just
Yeah.
I just feel like Denver's the better team.
Sure.
Sometimes we can break down a lot of the X's and O's and talk about the adjustments, and there were adjustments from both teams, but just in general, I just didn't feel like there was much more Miami can do. The only thing that was so odd was going into the game, right? We heard earlier today that Tyler Hero was
Yeah, I was
available
gonna
to
mention
play.
that.
It's funny because in our last podcast, we didn't think he was going to play just
Right.
because we hadn't heard anything. And then, of course, today they say he's available to play, and then he still doesn't play. So I don't know what was
Yeah,
up with that.
that's a bad coaching decision in my opinion. You
Yeah,
know.
and again, I don't even know if it was Spoelstra or maybe maybe a Hero just didn't feel, when it was game time like he could play because it sounded like they were saying he was probably going to have to play through discomfort. So maybe he
Yeah.
just didn't like it. But if he was available to play, I feel like he could have tried. But in fairness, right, they were up for a decent
Right.
stretch. I just think down the stretch, you just needed a little bit more, reliability on offense, right? Because
Sure.
it just it came down to some really rough possessions where again, like, what are some of these guys supposed to do, right? Like,
Exactly.
because it was like Vincent was forced into some tough floaters at the end of the clock, right? Bam also missed some really tough layups. Like I said, he was great in the first half. His
Yeah.
offense half
He
just
had me
kind of
worried.
yeah, but his offense in the second half just is. But again, like his skill set offensively is kind of what it is. Um, and again, like if he's not wreaking havoc around the basket, right? It's probably going to be harder for him to have a great offensive game unless his
Exactly.
mid range is hitting. But still, the Hero thing definitely was odd. So I don't know what was up with that because I would think in a do or die game he would at least play a few minutes. So I don't know what that was about because he was in uniform with a headband, I think, but he didn't play.
Yeah.
Played 0 minutes.
Yeah. That's a
In
bad
a do or
decision.
die finals game. So I don't know what that was about. But if he was able to play, I still feel like that was a mistake because you could just see down the stretch they needed something, anything, right? Because again,
They
like
were
Butler,
desperate.
he had an out of body experience, not out of body, right? But you know what I mean. Like he had
Yeah.
some crazy shots, right? He had the 2 threes, right? Where again, it just felt like it came out of nowhere because he was so invisible for most of the game. You're wondering where he was, and all of a sudden here he comes. But
Yeah, I think that was like
yeah,
his. Yeah, he only made 5 shots. You know.
right. Most of them were in the fourth, and then he had the
Exactly.
ill-advised, turnaround three, where they probably could have gotten a better shot,
I think you go for the
right?
two in
And
that
he threw it
situation.
away. Yeah, and then he threw it away towards the end, and again, that's where it feels like you could have used another, creator out there. But that, like I said, that's just the difference, and especially again going into the series without Hero, you're just limited, if you're Miami, and
For
again,
sure.
like you can play as hard as you want, but again, at the end of the day Denver was the better team with the best player. Like Jokic, he was obviously going to be crowned Finals MVP, right? Averaging, 30
Of
points,
course.
14 rebounds, 7 assists. So, clearly the best player on the floor. And again, Butler, again, like, the numbers were okay, right? But again, if you look at, his playoff numbers leading up to the finals, they were much better. It felt like over the course of the playoffs, he was just, kind of going on a downward trajectory. But in fairness, right, some of his performances in that first round were really high level. I mean, like a 56-point performance, I think. I
Yeah.
think he had a couple other 40-point games in the first round, and that just wasn't realistic, right? Like he was not going to average 40 a game
Yeah.
the
During that
entire.
stretch, he definitely was the best player in the playoffs, though, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he just ran out of gas. Maybe the ankle was bothering him, but
Right.
again, like there are limits to some of these guys, right?
They're
Because again, like
humans.
skill set is pretty good, right? But obviously, against a team like Denver, you just need a little bit more. And that's kind of the thing, right? Is just you lost on the margins for the most part. I mean, again, there were I think 3 of their losses were by double digits, right? Or
Hmm.
was the first game lost by double digits?
The first game. Let me check.
I think it was, right?
Yeah, they lost.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
lost by 11. Yeah.
Yeah, 104-93. Yeah, so an
Hmm.
11 point. Yeah, exactly. So pretty much, you know, almost all their wins except for this one were by double digits.
Yeah.
So again, and most of them kind of felt like they went the same way where it was close through the first, you know, half or so, and
Right.
then by the time the fourth quarter ran around, Denver just felt like they had more that they could go to, right? They could just get anything they wanted down the stretch, and Miami had to struggle, right? Because it's not like Butler's shots were easy shots that he made in the fourth. But then you watch like those Jokic floaters around the basket, right? Or Bruce Brown, getting a putback right at the basket. It's just again, it's tough for Miami because you have to work, you know, as hard as Denver, but then you have to work even harder because again, you're on a talent deficit. And that's kind of why this finals matchup was, it felt like the obvious choice was Denver. I know that there were some people who picked Miami because of how good they had been in the playoffs, but
Yeah.
sometimes it just is as simple as one team is better than the other.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
Sometimes
that's
the
kind of what
mojo
we saw.
runs out, man.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not to take away from Miami because again, they were the best Eastern Conference team these playoffs, obviously because they got to the finals. But you ran into a better team with a better player.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with everything that you said. Um, and the Tyler Hero thing still has me kind of scratching my head because I was watching the game and I was talking to the person I was watching with, and I was like, well, why isn't Hero in? Especially like I know he'd probably been out of rhythm, and like you said, there was probably some discomfort there. But I feel like, Tyler Hero probably could have given you better than Gabe Vincent and maybe Kyle Lowry. Like Kyle Lowry, he hit some pretty wild threes, I thought, deep ones. I think all of his made shots were
He had a
threes.
solid game.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of his made shots
Yeah,
were threes.
I think so.
So, but I don't know, like that tough shot making aspect, I think is what Miami was truly missing. Like they can do it sometimes, but I'm talking about when it counts, Um, not
4
ill-advised
13,
ones,
4 9,
Yeah. So,
all of it.
yeah, but in general, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. I at one point I did think, Miami had it, but then I saw, that Denver once Denver took the lead, I was like, okay, I think, they're probably gonna seal the deal with this one. And, my one gripe with this game, I think, was probably the officiating. I thought there were some weird calls. And I guess to start with the biggest one is that Jimmy Butler foul call on the three. Um, I didn't think that was a foul personally. I mean, I don't know how you can really foul somebody if you're not even really like. I mean, he was in the Aaron Gordon was in the vicinity, but he
Right.
didn't touch him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
If you weren't gonna call an yeah, if it wasn't an offensive foul, it should have probably just been a no call.
yeah, because he got kicked in the nuts.
Because
I'm pretty sure.
yeah, exactly. Because if you
Extended the
get
leg.
kicked there, it should be an offensive foul. And if
Right.
you're not gonna call it an offensive foul, just make it a no call. So
Yeah.
that was definitely a mistake there. That could have
That
cost
could have changed
Denver the game
everything.
potentially. Because it went from what I think was a 4-point game to a 1-point game.
1 point game.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
And then Miami took
And
the lead after that.
right, exactly. And again, like, over the course of a game, it feels like that does happen, right? Because again,
Sure.
like Denver's guys were in foul trouble. And some of it, was bad calls, and then others were just kind of mistakes. Like I think one of Jokic's fouls early was kind of a mistake I think he made where, again, he just made a decision that he shouldn't have made.
Right.
I think he was reaching in if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it wasn't great. And again, we've seen this over the course of the postseason where, some games it just feels like the calls are bad. And it could have impacted the game. Denver ended up pulling it out, right? Just because Miami in the fourth quarter just, ran out of steam, which again it was kind of weird because like I said, even when Denver was down, I still felt like they were gonna win because I'm like, man, Denver is playing so bad
I
and they're
know.
not getting blown out. Where it's like it feels like at some point they're gonna, pull it out. Oh boy, we
All
got
hail
in the
Jokic.
chat,
Yes, sir. The true
all,
MVP.
all hail Murray.
I don't know about that one, Chief. I mean, yeah, for sure he's been great throughout the playoffs, but in terms of
All
all
hail
hell, that's enough. But in terms of like, this game specifically, no, it was not all Hail Murray. Because, we have to look at it. I feel like Jokic kind of, I'm not going to say bailed the Nuggets out, but he definitely saved them. Because I think he
all
went
hail KCP.
I think he went 12 for 16 from the floor
12 for
tonight.
16.
Yeah, and like nobody else could really find the basket if you want me to be, pretty honest. And I think also Denver missed like 20 of their first like 22 3-point attempts. So it's like yuck, man. It was an ugly game from Denver offensively, but defensively they definitely figured it out and they knew what to do and used that size against Miami. Because like you said,
Yeah,
what can some of these guys do? What can Gabe Vincent do? When there's
yeah,
somebody taller on him. What can Strus really do? When these guys are contested, it's rough. When they're open, sure, that I think that's where their skills are is when they're open. But when they're contested, they don't have any tough shot makers except for Hero and maybe Butler occasionally. But this version of Butler, not so much. I mean, yeah, in the fourth, like you said, he did go on that little hot streak, but I don't know.
But other than that, not much. Yeah, I was at the gym. I kind of didn't get to watch it. Yeah, I
Yeah, it
mean,
was
because
wild, man.
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much ugly game. For a while. First half, Miami was up, and then eventually Denver pulled it out in the second half.
Hmm.
So that was and again, kind of similar to the last few games, just much uglier.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. This score, was kind of more reminiscent of like, the playoffs, years ago, right? Where I think that 2016, not to compare this game,
Hmm.
but I think the 2016 Cavs Warriors game 7, I think that score was like 93-89.
Right.
That was back in 2016, and the league was different back then.
Sure.
And it kind of had a feel like this, right? Because I think in that game 7, right, nobody could hit a shot for, half the fourth quarter until I think Kyrie hit the big 3.
Hmm.
And in this game, right, there were long stretches where just nobody could hit a shot. I mean, again, we talked about the shooting splits. Miami 34% from the field, 25% from 3. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
With only 8 turnovers, but still, that horrible shooting just, doesn't make up for it. And then Denver 45 from the field, which is solid, but 18% from 3 rounding up, and then 56.5% from the free throw line with 14 turnovers. Like, this was a bad game by both teams. It was a high level effort game.
Hmm.
But, a lot of missed shots. Michael Malone, I got it right. Michael, not Mike.
Yeah.
Michael Malone. He mentioned he liked a lot of the shots they were getting. And they weren't bad shots. It's just
couldn't
again
ball.
so many misses.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Porter Jr. had a lot of decent shots. Shots that weren't as bad as some of the shots that he was taking
Hmm.
in previous games. They still weren't going in. And you could tell the crowd was really rooting for him to hit those shots, right? When he was getting to the basket,
Yeah.
and finishing, they were really excited for him. But,
Yeah.
again, down the stretch, he just wasn't able to close it out. But that's why you have other guys. And that was the question for Denver in the playoffs was, what are the other guys
Right.
capable of and what can he do? Because we know for the most part what Jokic and Murray can do. Obviously, they needed to do it at the highest level, right? But we've seen, them play high-level games in the playoffs. But then after that, what does Michael Porter Jr. look like in a big finals game? What does Aaron Gordon or Caldwell Pope or Bruce Brown look like in a big finals game? And, for the most part, most of those guys delivered, right? Because you had a couple of, right? Because last game, right, was a game where both Jokic and Jamal Murray on offense struggled, right? And that was the game where you had Bruce Brown pop off for 21 and Aaron Gordon pop off for 27. And then in this game, right, he goes from 27 points, Aaron Gordon, to 4 points.
Yeah.
So I mean, just in general, it's just interesting, just in terms of how these teams are. Michael Porter, MP trash.
Yeah.
Are you talking about my player from 2K?
Oh God, no.
Michael Porter Jr. Yeah, not the greatest finals. Definitely much better in this game, but
Yeah.
they didn't really need him that much. Interestingly enough, because again, like, they won kind of in spite of him.
Hmm.
Again, he was better in this game, right? Like, they don't win this game without what he was able to do for most of the game. He wasn't good enough late in the game to close. And again, that's kind of for him what he is, right? If he's not giving you a ton on offense, he's just probably not going to be playing a whole lot.
Yeah.
And again, he was better on offense this game. That's why he played 34 minutes. I think
Exactly.
he played 21 minutes. In the previous game, I think in the last few finals games he played under 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
better performance there, but just in general, right? Like, just hats off to these guys in terms of what they were able to do, this season, right? They were the number 1 seed for most of the year, right? And, were kind of overlooked in a way. Obviously, there were people who thought they could come out of the West, right? But they weren't usually looked at as like the clear cut pick, right? It was, like I said, it was usually either Phoenix or Golden State. But again, they were great these entire playoffs, right? They lost, I guess what? They lost 4 games the entire postseason, one in the first round, 2 in the second round,
Yep.
none in the conference finals, and just 1 in the finals. So, super dominant at home, right? They lost only 1 game, I think, at home these entire playoffs. I think they were 10-1.
Yeah.
And then even on the road, right? They were able to, perform better than expected because during the regular season, they weren't a great road team, but, they closed out these playoffs by winning every road game after that, right? So I mean, yeah, it's a really good team. But it will be interesting to see kind of going forward, what happens because we talked about it in our last several live streams and podcasts where it does feel like it's a different era in the NBA where
Sure.
not necessarily that any team can win, but just that I don't feel like we're gonna have repeat champions,
Right.
every year like we
It's
did.
probably going to be somebody different.
Yeah. Yeah, like last year was like again, the last 5 seasons we've had 5 different champions, right? Going
Yep.
back to 2019, Raptors, Lakers, Bucks, Warriors, and now the Nuggets. Um, and again, like, health has always been a big factor, right? Denver had back-to-back seasons with injury issues. They were healthy this year.
Hmm.
And then they got a chip, right? Warriors, I think last season they won the title, but before that they had back-to-back years with injuries.
Right.
So obviously it could change next year, right? Like Denver, clearly, when you win a title, you have to be looked at as one of the favorites going in. Right. So they're gonna be one of the favorites now, right? People obviously are gonna, take them more seriously and look at them as a legit dangerous team now that they've won a title. Um, right. And Jokic and Murray now are inserted into that, top tier NBA duo, right? Obviously, like again, like I know Murray had a couple of weird games, but he was great, pretty much these playoffs. And obviously Jokic was great through these playoffs, and that was kind of the difference there. So it'll be interesting to see going forward, what we're gonna get, from Denver. Because again, now that they've won the title and they've done it at the highest level, right? They can kind of have stretches like during the regular season, say next year, right, where they're kind of like under the radar, right? Kind of taking it easy. Because they know, right? Because they know come playoff time, they have enough, to contend and win a chip.
Sure.
But again, it's not going to be easy because again, we know the Western Conference was really good this year, right? A lot of talk this season was that the Western Conference wasn't as good, but we ended up having a Western Conference team win it again. And the Western Conference in the playoffs was better, and it's going to be better next year, right? Because
Yeah.
we know that there's going to be teams, that were in the playoffs that are going to improve, and teams that weren't in the playoffs that are going to improve. Um, so again, it's a great thing for Denver, and just keep it going, right? Because again, you got a title. Let's see what they can continue to do. But for now, again, the names are etched into the NBA history books, right? Because again, it's hard to get to the finals, let alone win one. And Denver was able to do that and win a title its first trip to the finals. Because we've seen other teams in the past, get to the finals, not win it, and then maybe they come back and win it later.
Right.
And then we've seen other teams make the finals and then never come back. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. But again, they were able to accomplish that, and not a whole lot of upper tier superstars can necessarily say that, right? We've only had a handful of guys the last few years win titles, and now you can add Jokic to that list of greats.
For sure. And my thing is, I feel like Denver, they still have to iron out some things. I feel like if
Yeah,
they're looking to potentially go back to back, they definitely have to iron out some things. I think they need to potentially get deeper. I'm not sure how they can do that money wise, but looking
right.
at it
It's
like
gonna have to be the draft, I think.
yeah, for sure. And it's like looking at it now, like it's kind of crazy. They shot like what? Let me do the math. I think it would be like what, around 7% from three in the first half, I think, right?
It was pretty awful. I mean, they only made 5 threes all game, and I
Mm,
think we had like at least like 2 or 3 in the fourth. So I mean, because I think Caldwell Pope made a 3 in the fourth, Murray
yeah.
made a 3 in the fourth.
Okay. So I'm
So I
looking at
mean,
it.
like,
So I'm
yeah,
looking at it. They shot 6.7% from three, and that is
yeah,
the worst first half in the history of the finals, 10 shot minimum, and they only trailed by seven. So they were
yeah,
good,
yeah.
but I feel like,
That's my yeah,
against I'm not gonna say I don't think Miami was the best team in the East, frankly.
fair.
If you want me to be honest, I think if this was Denver versus say a healthy Milwaukee, I think we would be probably going to Game 7. You know what I mean? No way.
Yeah,
Trey tweeted we next. Bye. Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's rough, dude. They're going through some stuff, but sticking with the Nuggets and
yeah,
stuff. I mean, like I don't know. For me, I feel like they do have some things to do to get better potentially. If they want to contend back to back. And like I said, I've not to say, Miami wasn't competitive at all and they're not they're a great team, but I feel
yeah.
like in the East they were not the strongest for sure. And we've said it multiple times. There is some sense of luck and Jimmy Butler was on fire, in the first couple of rounds, but I don't know. Their path was very interesting. We can't count that
Yeah.
out because they were the underdogs, but I definitely don't think they were the best in the East. So, if Denver potentially goes back to the finals and then they encounter a different animal in the finals in the East, where it's like, say, a stronger Boston, a healthy Milwaukee, even, maybe Philly if they figure things out over there,
Maybe you factor in Atlanta because Trace literally said we're next.
yeah, right. But like, I don't know. And I'm not trying to like, Shanghai Jimmy. I'm not trying to like discount or discredit what Miami's done or what Denver's done either. I just think there's room for both of these teams to get better. I don't think we saw both of these teams at their full potential, even though, the Nuggets were very good. But, just
Right. I
looking at
think
the stats and the closeout stuff, I feel like, there's room to grow.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think for Denver, probably an upgrade from Jeff Green.
Sure.
Shanghai Hawks. So I guess, and then I guess with Bruce Brown, it'll be interesting because I think he has a player option. Considering how well he played this postseason and this regular season, I feel like he would probably opt out for more money.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's all based off of, oh my gosh, it'll all be based off of, whether or not, Denver is going to be able to pay that. I don't know what the most they can give him is, but there's probably a team that can offer him more. But at the same time, is the team going to overpay to
Right.
get Bruce Brown? I don't know. But I guess we can kind of get into Miami's offseason thing a little
Sure.
bit, since clearly season is over. I mean, I guess the NBA season as a whole is over, right?
Yeah,
But
it's
Miami
over.
ended up not winning the title. And you do kind of wonder, right? Because Bam, Jimmy, Hero, they're all on max contracts. It doesn't really feel like that's a good enough big three, but at the same time, they did get to 2 NBA finals.
Yeah.
But again, Hero not playing in a do or die game when he was cleared to play. I wonder what's kind of going on there.
Right.
Not to say that he get moved, but it just kind of makes you think. Vincent and Struess, I think, have to be paid. I think I saw a rumor that from the Athletic that mentioned they could potentially get 15 million a year.
Okay.
Which I guess that'll be interesting to see if they get that much. Because that feels kind of steep, but I could be wrong. Because obviously they're better. Obviously they're much better than minimum contract players. And that's probably just overall the asking price for a lot of these guys. But that's the issue with Miami is that if you pay those guys and you have Butler and Bam and Hero, that's a really expensive roster. And then you factor in
Yeah.
Duncan Robinson, who's on a decent sized contract. Lowry might be in the last year of his deal. I think this was his. I guess this was his second year in Miami. So I guess he has a third year. He's got
Yeah.
one more year left.
He's got one more.
So that's a really expensive roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like Miami to win the title, if they want to win, is gonna have to improve.
Yeah.
Obviously people mentioned the Dame thing. I don't know if that's gonna happen, and I'm not even gonna speculate on that.
No.
But it definitely is something to think about in terms of if you're Miami, what can you do to upgrade? Because you do have some good pieces, but in order to win the title, again, it just feels like you needed more. And again, maybe if Hero plays, maybe it's a different story.
Right.
I don't feel like it would have been a different story. Maybe Miami wins, one more game and it goes 6, maybe even 7.
Right.
But
Sure.
I just didn't feel like. But even with Hero, I didn't feel like Miami was going to beat Denver.
Because he's a liability on defense. People forget that.
Dame, yeah. I mean, Dame's not moving much.
I don't think he's moving.
Yeah, I'm confused as to if he meant like if he's not moving the needle at all, or if he's not getting traded.
He's not getting traded.
Yeah, again, if it happens, it's gonna be a team that's gonna like overpay because I feel like again Portland loves him, and we keep hearing rumors about them, trying to contend right now, maybe trading that pick. Again, that's not what I would do. I would trade him, but again, obviously because of the connection between those two camps, they're not just gonna trade him just to trade him. They would
Right.
obviously wait until he says, "I'm done. I want out of here."
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful and not messy.
Fred VanVleet. I mean, he did opt out of his player option, so that means he is an unrestricted free agent.
He's testing.
And he's gonna have some shooters. He didn't have a great season, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Didn't shoot that bad from 3, right? But from the field, it was pretty nasty.
It's 39%. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right?
we know
Below
we can do
40
better.
Yeah, below 40% is never really a great sign.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a high volume offensive player, that means you're probably taking too many shots that you shouldn't be taking. I think he took 10 threes a game, which is a lot, for him. I mean, and again, he shot well from 3, right? So I guess after that, right, probably not really that great of a finisher around the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And he is also small, not that athletic. He does compete defensively, but then the other concern I would have is he's, getting close to 30. And, if you get him a new contract now, I mean, I guess there's a high chance that he might start declining. Bro's
Mm-hmm.
going to mess around and lose contracts. I'll be RB.
Okay,
well, that's
dude.
nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, regardless, with that Fred VanVleet thing, from Woes, I do think, like I said, I do think there'll be teams interested in him. I think it just kind of comes down to, what is he looking for? And what are other teams looking, to pay him? Because, we've heard names that had been mentioned, right? I think obviously, we had heard teams like, say, I think it was LA. I think Orlando was another one. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Phoenix was another one. And
Yeah.
again, we've heard of, because again, we know that he has value. We know that there are teams that want him.
Right.
Um, I don't know. Again, he turned down, that 4-year, $114 million extension. So that would make me think that he wants more than that,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think, the range suggested is somewhere around 4 years, 140, right? Like the Tyler Hero level
Hmm.
contract. Um, so I don't know. Again, he had a rough regular season, and you could factor in it wasn't a great team.
Sure.
His usage was probably higher than it should be, right? For what he is as a player.
Right.
But I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily want to be the team that gives him that contract. I do
Right.
think he's a good player, but I guess, but again, like, teams have cap space, that factors in as well, right? Because if he wants to get to a good team, right, those teams probably don't have cap space, right? Like the Lakers, if he were to go there, I think it would have to be through a sign and trade. And again, as we've talked about on the regular podcast, any sign and trade that you do hard caps you. And if you're LA, do you want to do that for Fred VanVleet? And then
Yeah.
if you do that with Toronto, then you have to factor in their hard capped if they do a sign and like a double sign and trade with D'Lo. And do they want to be hard capped just to
Right.
get D'Angelo Russell? I don't feel like either team would love doing that. Um, we've heard rumors that LA would probably prefer to do a sign and trade with Russell than bring him back. But again, sometimes you have to factor in what is your best available option. And we'll know, right, come the offseason. We're not going
Yeah.
to know right now. Obviously, we have the draft
It's
coming.
too early. Yeah.
Yeah, free agency still, what, I guess, about 3.5 weeks away.
Yeah.
So, we're at a point now where we're probably just going to have to wait a little bit. But we're going to keep hearing rumors, right? Because we even heard rumors about New Orleans trying to take Scoot Henderson
Yeah.
draft, right? They would obviously have to trade up. And we know, right? Like Portland wouldn't be too upset if they moved that number 3 pick. We know Charlotte, they don't even necessarily want to take Scoot according to reports.
Right.
So there's a world where it happens. I'd be kind of surprised because I would
I don't
wonder,
know why.
what New Orleans would be giving up. And I would also, be kind of concerned that one of those teams at the 2 or 3 spot would turn down getting Scoot Henderson.
That's
But,
what I'm saying.
again,
Hey, maybe there's
we
something we don't know because I think
yeah,
Scoot's generational talent potentially.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll do our mock drafts, once we do our next episode, especially since the season is done, right? But
Yeah.
obviously, we both have him, in that second spot after, Wembanyama.
Oh
So, I
yeah,
mean,
sure.
just in general, I get why I understand New Orleans' line of thinking, but I also, again, would be interested in who they would give up because, again, it's just like, you know, um, what would those teams take, and they give up the number 2 or 3 pick, I would wonder, what does New Orleans give up in that deal, right? Like, is it McCollum? I mean, like, would Portland take CJ McCollum back? Like, I don't feel like that would happen.
Right. It can't be Zion,
Or
right?
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
That would be really surprising to me. I maybe you could maybe, but I don't feel like that would happen. That
I
would be
don't.
kind of
Yeah,
wild.
that would be insane.
Yeah. So
It's
I do
crazy.
wonder.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I mean, like in terms of the rumors, it's gonna happen. We're gonna hear them probably every day until something actually moves, and that's just how it goes. Because a lot of the stuff can be planted. It's PR sometimes, but and it could be both sides working, and it's just chatter, and it keeps everybody relevant too. But man, I just can't believe the season's over. I just can't
Right.
believe it.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's funny. We started this podcast, kind of during the middle point of the
Yeah,
season. I think we started,
January.
around the beginning. Yeah, around the beginning of January. So we're coming up on that, anniversary, that
Yeah.
50th anniversary. But
Yeah.
regardless, yeah, it's definitely been a wild ride because we talked about a lot of things over the course of the season, right? A lot of crazy performances, obviously crazy trades. We had
Mhm.
that deadline, and then the episodes covering the deadline, right? Of course, we had our playoffs, and all those conversations, right?
Yeah.
With teams getting eliminated, our finals talk. So it's been a crazy ride. Definitely one of the more topsy turvy NBA seasons I can
Sure.
remember, just
Yeah.
because so many bizarre things happening all at once. With
Trades.
teams that were so up and down during the course of the season, right? Where a team would look awful, right? And then after a while, all of a sudden they're back in it, right? Counting teams out and then all of a sudden pulling them back in. right? Like, again, Miami was a team that everybody pretty much was done with,
Yeah.
after they lost that playing game, and then they get to the NBA Finals, beating other teams along the way, right? Milwaukee, right, looked like the best team in the league, and then they go out in 5 to the Miami Heat. Now Giannis got hurt, so we have to, factor that into the equation.
Yeah.
But still, right, again, Lakers started off 2-10. They looked like they were going to give, potentially the number 1 pick to New Orleans. Then they finished the season with a better record than New Orleans, and they're in the conference finals. So many
Yeah.
bizarre things. It still ended up with a team that had the best record in the West winning the title. So I guess in terms of if you were to simulate this season, 100 times, not that this would be the most likely scenario per se, but it would probably be close. Because again,
Yeah.
if you're one of the
Number
best
1 seed.
teams during the regular season, obviously the regular season doesn't mean everything because we saw a number of teams get upset in the playoffs.
Mhm.
But this doesn't feel super far off from like, okay, when you're listing out, what teams have a realistic shot at winning, it wouldn't again be the number 1, but again, they would be in that somewhere in that top 5 range, right?
Right.
Because most people I think had Milwaukee as the favorites.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, right, then you would put like, Boston, Phoenix, Golden State.
Sure.
And then after that, right, Denver was kind of in that next crop, right? With the LA teams, with maybe Philly.
Because I
But
remember,
either way, right?
I remember
Yeah.
when, sorry to cut you off, but I remember when Phoenix first acquired Durant. I remember their
Yeah.
odds through the like
They
betting
were the
stuff.
favorites.
Yeah, they went up. I think they skyrocketed from like the 6th best to like the 1st or 2nd, and then Denver moved to like 3rd or 4th, something like that. So
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
interesting, and it's a whole big moving entity, and that's
Yeah.
what I love about the NBA. Like anything can
Right.
really truly happen. We had an 8 seed in the finals, and they almost did it. They could have done it.
Yeah, the first time since I think, I was like a baby.
Right.
I think when it happened, I think the last time an 8 seed was in the finals, I think it was the 99 Knicks.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't even alive.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But either way, and obviously we'll do, on our podcast probably more of a reflection,
Yes.
longer, and more, I guess, quote unquote scripted reflection
Yeah.
of how the season went.
And we'll have time to have it marinate, and we can really think
'cause
about it, because
Exactly,
this
'cause
is like in the moment kind of thing. It
Right,
happened
exactly.
less than an hour ago.
Right, exactly. And when I say scripted, that's probably not the right word because we don't use scripts, but it's
Yeah.
just more so like you said, just having more time to kind of let everything sink in.
Exactly.
Just in kind of just thinking about how this season went. Because again, when we were talking about all the matchups, right, we had matchups that we were, right on, and then matchups that we definitely were wrong about. But at the end of the day, right, we still got the finals right, which again isn't really much of a surprise. But there were some people that picked Miami. But,
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like
Especially
they were good
there were a
enough.
lot of people that picked them on a game-to-game basis too. That was kind of interesting too.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like once they went up 3-1, I thought like Denver was
Yeah,
gonna
that's
win
when it
this.
was
But
solidified.
again, Miami gave them a fight,
Yeah.
which is I guess all you could really ask for, for the most part.
Yeah, I
Again,
thought it was entertaining.
when you're not the better team, you got to play, up to another level. And again, that's really hard because again, Denver, we saw they did not really play a good game and they still ended up winning. Just because they did just enough. Because again,
Yeah.
you look at we talked about it earlier, an hour ago or almost an hour ago. You look at a lot of the numbers and it wasn't pretty for a number of these guys. But again, then you look over at Miami and it wasn't that pretty either. So even
Exactly.
with their best player, didn't really play well. So
Precisely. Yeah. And I guess we've kind of almost hit that hour mark, but I feel like there's really nothing else to talk about. We've kind of let all of our initial thoughts and initial reactions on this finals and this game specifically out. I think the cat is out of the bag pretty much in terms of our thoughts. And we talked about some rumors here and there, especially the main ones. We're not going to get into the drama stuff. We're not even going to touch that. But yeah, I guess we have a short out right now, so please check that out. We have a brand new episode that came out today as well, so please check that out as well. And our next episode will be what, Thursday or Friday?
well, it'll
Excuse
come
me.
out Friday.
Yeah, Friday. It'll come out Friday. So be in tune for that as well. And then Monday will probably be looking at the draft stuff in serious depth and stuff like that. Like you said, mock drafts, our thoughts on some of the top prospects and some sleepers probably for sure. And yeah, like I said, we've almost hit that hour mark, but I think it's, we should probably cut it unless, you have anything more to say.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, again, congratulations to
Oh, yeah.
both teams for a great postseason, and then obviously congratulations to Denver for winning the championship.
First one in their 47 years, I think, in the league.
We love you guys too.
Yeah, we love you guys too. Everybody in the chat, everybody who's lurking, everybody who's watching this video, everybody who's gonna watch this video, because it seems like everybody watches it after after we've ended. That seems like where we accumulate, most of the attention on these live streams. We love each and every one of our subs, viewers, commenters, whatever you want to go by. We love every single one of you. And like you said, we really have nothing else to say. I mean, like I said, I thought it was exciting. Once again, congratulations to both teams. They fought very hard. And a big congratulations to Denver for getting their first NBA championship in franchise history. But with that being said, this is Off Ball Takes, and we are signing off for the night.